We've teased this and set it all up. I've told you that I thought this was a total rebuild and that I was questioning going to grab all your talent out of the transfer portal as opposed to building through elite signing classes where LSU has in the past made its hay. It's a different dawn, different day, but LSU is going to lead on a ton of transfers. And so where do I think this season goes? We start with the opener in New Orleans against Florida State. I think Florida State's offensive line is going to have a real problem with LSU's defensive front in this game. And I think LSU's wide receivers are going to be a lot for Florida State to handle on the outside. I do think I think LSU beats Florida State in the Superdome to start 1-0. You come home for a game against Southern that will be a glorified scrimmage. You move to 2-0. Then Mississippi State comes to Tiger Stadium. I think LSU is going to play a lot of really close games in the second half in SEC play. I think this is one of those. Will Rogers makes me a little bit nervous, but I trust LSU's coaching staff to understand what this offense is going to look like and slow it down pretty significantly. And I think LSU will do enough on its home field to win that game, move to 3-0 against Mississippi State. You beat New Mexico the next week to go to 4-0, and that sets up a trip to Auburn. Auburn's going to be incredibly one-dimensional on offense. They're going to be very, very, very much a run-heavy team. They return almost their entire offensive line. They got two of the better backs in the league, in Hunter and, of course, Bigby. I don't like their quarterback situation. I think it's going to be TJ Finley. I don't trust that at all. And I think LSU is going to go to Auburn and win to move to 5-0.
Ooh, okay. I like that.
So then you have a showdown at home, which will be a raucous environment against Tennessee coming to Baton Rouge if LSU is 5-0 at that point. I just think Tennessee is going to be a lot for LSU to keep up with. I think the Vols are going to be a tough matchup week in and week out for a lot of teams. Their defense isn't going to be very good. Does LSU have the firepower to keep up with them? I have my doubts. I picked Tennessee to come to Tiger Stadium and win. Then LSU would go to Florida. Florida's light on playmakers, in my opinion. They're overhauling what was already a bad defense. I don't love Richardson at quarterback. We'll see what it looks like. But I think LSU has a real good chance to go to Florida and get a win. That would move LSU to 6-1. You're thinking, well, what happened in that intro? Why did you say all those negative things about the talent level and then pick them to start 6-1? Well, here we go. I think Ole Miss, I trust Lane Kiffin to make things difficult on what I think is an average LSU secondary. I think the secondary is going to be average. That's what these guys outside of Bernard Converse have really been their entire career. They're veterans, but I think they're average, and that concerns me against a team that is going to be pretty creative in the passing game. I think Ole Miss comes to Tiger Stadium and wins. Alabama comes to LSU. I'm not really going to talk much about that game. Then LSU goes to Arkansas to play the Hogs. Look, Arkansas is at home. I think their quarterback's better. They've still got a pretty veteran defense. I think Arkansas beats LSU as the wheels are a little bit falling off here. That's 3 games in a row that you've lost. UAB comes to Baton Rouge. I think LSU takes care of business against the Blazers. That sets up a season finale in College Station against Texas A&M. And I think that A&M is going to win that game in Kyle Field, which is going to be an incredible environment for them. That's kind of where I am right now. That pulls you to 7-5. With a nice start, but the wheels kind of coming off a little bit late. Your thoughts on how I've rolled through that?
Look, I've heard a lot of talking heads go that route. I think that's pretty close. I think Vegas, what they have it right there on the money. So if you're taking the under, you're right there. So I think you're an under guy. I'm an over guy. I just glass a little half full for me. But yeah, I could see that. I mean, there's a lot of depth issues. I think I've talked about it time and time again with the secondary. Just not what we're used to at LSU, and I think that creates a world if anyone goes down. Things could possibly be in a very, very, awkward situation, especially for those outside guys. Feel great about the nickel position. I think you got a bunch of guys that can play that role, but the outside is, I think, what potentially could be an issue. But I think, the best way to massage that is a pass rush, and I think that's exactly what this team has, and I think that's what's going to have to, lead them. If that glass is going to be half full, that pass rush is going to have to be, on an All-American type level, and I think you have those players in that room to pull that off.
No, I do too. I love LSU up front on the defensive front. And one of the questions that we will get for the next 2 weeks, and then it'll probably stop, and then you'll just get into what the season actually looks like is, what if Brian Kelly goes this? What if he goes that? And so what if he goes 7-5? What if he goes 9-3? Well, if he goes 9-3, I can say comfortably that that's a resounding success. Now, I would say that's a success, and most people would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 7-5, I think it would be, most people would say that's a failure. Now, that's just the expectations that have been built in this place over the course of the last 20 years, and that's what makes it great. But my answer is always, but it depends on what it looks like. That 7-5 right there, where you lose 4 of your last 5, feels pretty crummy in December. But what if you lose to Florida State and you lose to Auburn on the road, but then you play Bama really close at home, you beat Arkansas on the road, beat UAB, and then beat A&M by 18 points, and it's still the same 7-5, but you lost the opener and you lost a road game against Auburn, and then you figured it out late and played really well down the stretch, and your only loss late was to Alabama. Well, then I think a lot of people would look at it and go, well, they got better as the season went on, and they found this at quarterback. Like, that's the way Tennessee seasons have always gone, the last 15 years, where they've beaten Missouri and Kentucky and Vanderbilt, and then they beat Pittsburgh or NC State in a bowl game, and you're going, oh, well, they kind of figured it out, only to realize when you turn back around in September and October and you can't beat Florida and you lose by 30 to Georgia, it doesn't look as good the next year. But what I'm saying is, it depends on what it looks like. I can't tell you if 7-5 is an abject failure or something to build off of. But you have to tell what it looks like. This is just a basically worthless prediction of what I think is going to happen because we have time to talk about this before they actually, kick it off and go play some football. So the issue when someone would ask me what is 7-5, what would be the reaction if it was 7-5? You got to tell me what it looks like.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be huge. And I think it's probably not saying much, but, looking at how things were run last season, just offensively and defensively, I think you're going to see a huge adjustment that way on a lot of fronts. And I think that creates a world where you're going to be a lot more competitive than you were against a lot of teams that probably shouldn't have beat you as bad as they did last season. And so I think looking at this coaching staff, I think that's going to be a big piece, especially with them not having the roster, that they're going to have in a couple seasons, with them potentially having a top 5 recruiting class this year. But I think after this season, looking at what Coach Kelly's going to do, I think if you do have a 7-5 season, I think you're going to have a huge contingent that say, hey, this is the guy who doesn't fit the culture. Look, we told you, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to have people that say, look, man, this is his first year to rebuild. Look at what this team has been. He has a top 5 recruiting class. Let's give him time to kind of build what he wants to do. But I think you'll get people from both sides of the fence on that.
It's here's what I feel really good about, and I teased this at the end of the first segment, but I think Brian Kelly is putting together the foundation of a well-run program. That doesn't guarantee SEC West championships, Southeastern Conference titles, and playoff berths and championships. It's really hard to do that. We've been lucky, and this happened. We played for it 4 times in the last 20 years, but to me, he's going to run this thing with an incredibly high floor. I don't think that quote-unquote high floor exists this year when you're overhauling the roster to this extent and relying on this amount of transfers that haven't proven themselves at this level. It doesn't mean those guys can't come in and be really good players. It doesn't mean that Colby Richardson can't come in and be a really nice corner. I just would rather my corner not be some kid that just transferred in from McNeese. That's just me. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. For me to come up here and just pump sunshine against that would be totally disingenuous. And look, we got a pretty damn good kicker from Assumption, like that ended up being one of the better ones we've ever had. Like, you can have guys that can come up and play. It's just I'm uncomfortable with the composition of this roster as it relates to the last 25 years of LSU football. I just don't think it quite stacks up because for the first time in 25 years of LSU football, the entire thing got ripped down to the studs. And that's just the way it feels right now as I sit back before the emotion of it all comes together and try to look at it as objectively as I can, when you realize that the class that would be juniors and seniors, that only 16 of those 47 signees are left and half of those have been career backups, man, it looks intimidating to me.
Yeah, no, I think you have every right to say that. Looking at this team and looking at this roster, even looking at what they did in the transfer portal, I think attacking positions of need. But it's not like you are doing what Alabama does, ripping the 5-star receiver from this school or ripping the the number 2 receiver from that school. It's not those. You're getting guys from FIU and getting guys from East Tennessee State and things like that. So yes, I could see where you could say, hey, you're matching these guys up with some of the best teams in the SEC. They're going to have to play out of their minds to play on that level. So if you want to look at it that way, I could totally see that. But I still think in the position groups of strength, like wide out, defensive line, you got really, really talented players. And so it's going to be up to this coaching staff to really let those guys, really take over and be this team's strong suit and try to minimize their weaknesses.
So I've got wins over Florida State, Southern Mississippi State, New Mexico, Auburn, Florida, and UAB. Losses to Tennessee, Ole Miss, Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. That's the way that I see it here. I desperately hope I'm wrong specifically about that last one that I just mentioned there, but we'll get to that when we have a little more time.
Thanks so much for watching Hunt Hill on YouTube.
Now do us a favor. Hit the red subscribe button below and throw us a like. See you next time.